The Galactic Council was the largest and most powerful organization in the galaxy. It consisted of the leaders of countless advanced species, each with their own unique talents, technologies, and worlds. They met once every cycle to discuss galactic affairs, and their decisions shaped the future of entire civilizations. The Council believed itself to be the final authority on everything, from politics to warfare. This particular cycle, they were discussing the human race. The human ambassador, Captain Elias Ward, sat in the meeting room, surrounded by some of the most powerful beings in the universe. The members of the Galactic Council, sitting around a long, shining table, were in the middle of a heated discussion about Earth's military capabilities. "Humans are nothing more than primitive creatures," said a tall, silver-skinned alien from the Zoreth system, speaking in a voice that carried across the chamber. His name was Koreth, and he was known for his arrogance. He had spent years observing Earth from a distance and believed he understood everything about the humans. Their weapons are outdated, and they rely far too much on their biological creatures, dogs of all things. How can anyone take them seriously? A group of alien generals nodded in agreement. They all shared the same view. Humans were weak, primitive, and incapable of standing up to the might of the galactic powers. Their technology, while impressive in some ways, was nothing compared to the highly advanced alien weapons and ships. And yet, despite this, humans had always managed to survive, something that intrigued the Council, but also made them uneasy. Captain Ward, dressed in his human military uniform, listened quietly as the members of the Council mocked his species. He had heard it all before, the dismissive comments about Earth's weapons and armies. They often laughed at the idea that a species like humans could ever be a serious threat. The conversation grew louder, and the insults kept coming. One of the alien generals from the Taurus species, who was known for his cold, calculating nature, spoke next. "It's laughable that humans still use animals in their military. They're so-called dogs. What good are they in a real war? It's just a waste of resources." His voice was laced with mockery, but it was also tinged with concern. The humans' strange attachment to their pets, their animals, confused and baffled him. As the insults continued, Captain Ward felt his patience begin to wear thin. He had come to this meeting to represent his people, and though he knew the Galactic Council held immense power, he couldn't let them continue mocking humanity like this. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the room full of alien faces. He knew this was his moment to make a statement. Without raising his voice, he spoke calmly, yet firmly. "If you think humans are weak," he said, "you are gravely mistaken. We may not have the most advanced technology, but we have something none of you have: the will to survive. We fight with everything we have, and we don't fight alone." Koreth laughed, dismissing Ward's words with a wave of his hand. "The will to survive," he sneered. "That's your argument? You think that's enough to stand up against a real threat?" He turned to the rest of the Council, his voice growing louder. "Humans have nothing. They may be able to survive, but they cannot win. Not without superior weapons, not without advanced technology." The rest of the Council murmured in agreement, but Captain Ward was unfazed. He had heard this before. The mocking, the ridicule. But something in his eyes showed the Council that he was not joking. He knew something they didn't. He had experienced the power of Earth's military, and more importantly, the power of its bond with animals. "Maybe you don't understand," Captain Ward continued, his voice now gaining strength. "Humans don't just fight with weapons. We fight with our hearts, and we fight with our allies." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. "When we face a challenge, we stand together, humans and our animals. Together, we are stronger than you can imagine." The Council members exchanged curious glances. Some looked skeptical, while others were intrigued by his words. Ward didn't give them time to respond. He stood up and walked toward the large window that overlooked the galaxy. "Soon," he said, "you'll see for yourselves just how strong humanity really is. And when you do, remember my words. We fight with everything we have." and we don't fight alone." With that, he turned and walked out of the meeting room. The Galactic Council was left in silence, unsure of what to make of Captain Ward's warning. The laughter had stopped, but the doubt in their eyes remained. But deep down, they didn't know it yet, but soon they would learn just how wrong they had been about humanity. The galaxy was a vast place, filled with countless civilizations, some older and more advanced than others. The Galactic Council had always been able to control the flow of events, keeping peace between the various species, or at least pretending to. However, the recent conflict between Earth and the Zarkith Dominion was quickly proving that the Council's control was not as secure as they believed. The Zarkith Dominion, a fierce, war-driven race, had declared war on a neutral world near the edge of human space. The Council had watched from a distance, unwilling to intervene. It wasn't their problem, they thought. After all, the Zarkith had fought many wars before, and they were powerful. Their soldiers were massive, reptilian creatures with thick scales and sharp claws, and their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zarkith had a reputation for crushing their enemies with brute force and overwhelming numbers. But there was something the Galactic Council didn't know. The humans were not as weak as they thought, and they didn't rely on technology alone to win battles. The humans had a unique strength, their bond with animals, something that none of the advanced species could understand. The first signs of trouble came quickly. The Zarkith, confident in their superiority, launched a full-scale invasion on the neutral planet, expecting to crush the defense in a matter of days. The neutral world was small, with no military presence to speak of, and the Zarkith believed they would claim it easily. What they didn't expect was the sudden appearance of human forces, including Earth's most unusual but powerful allies, the Deathworld dogs. These were not ordinary dogs. They were a breed of genetically enhanced canines, bred specifically for warfare. On Earth, they were known as Deathworld dogs for their extreme intelligence, strength, and loyalty. Their senses were far beyond what any other species could comprehend. They were faster, smarter, and stronger than any creature the Zarkith had ever encountered. The dogs were linked to human soldiers through advanced AI communication systems, allowing them to work together in perfect harmony. The Zarkith landed on the planet's surface with their usual arrogance, confident that victory was already theirs. They sent their war machines forward, massive lizards with heavy armor, each carrying powerful energy weapons. The Zarkith soldiers, towering and fierce, marched through the planet's forests and fields, expecting little resistance. They quickly began to occupy key cities and military stations. But then, something strange began to happen. As the Zarkith advanced deeper into the planet, they began to notice strange things. The air felt heavy, as if something was watching them. The distant sound of howling echoed through the trees. At first, they thought it was just the wind, but the howls grew louder and more frequent, like something was moving in the shadows. Suddenly, the first Zarkith warrior vanished. No one saw what happened. One moment, he was marching with his squad, and the next, he was gone. His weapon was found abandoned, his body nowhere to be seen. The Zarkith soldiers grew uneasy. They had fought countless battles and faced numerous enemies, but this was different. They had never encountered anything like this before. At first, they dismissed it as a fluke, but then it happened again. Another Zarkith warrior, this time a commanding officer, disappeared without a trace. His unit was in full alert, weapons drawn, scanning every corner of the dense forest around them. But despite their best efforts, they found no signs of life, only the eerie silence of the woods. It was then that the Zarkith commanders began to realize what was happening. The Deathworld dogs were hunting them. The dogs moved with deadly precision, attacking from the shadows. They were almost impossible to see in the dense forest, their fur blending seamlessly with the environment. When they struck, it was swift and silent. They tore through the Zarkith ranks, crippling their machines, attacking their weaker points, and causing chaos. It was clear that these dogs had been trained for war, but not like anything the Zarketh had ever seen. They didn't rely on brute strength like the Zarketh. Instead, they used strategy, coordination, and their incredible instincts to tear apart the invaders. Meanwhile, human soldiers, who had been watching the Zarketh from afar, began to engage in the battle, using the confusion to their advantage. The human forces, though small in number compared to the Zarketh, fought with unwavering determination, knowing that the survival of their world depended on it. But it wasn't just the humans that made the difference. It was the Deathworld dogs. They had become the perfect soldiers, carrying out hit-and-run tactics with deadly precision, causing panic and fear among the Zarketh ranks. Back at the Galactic Council's headquarters, news of the battle spread quickly. The members of the council, who had once mocked humans for their reliance on animals, now found themselves watching in shock as the Zarketh forces began to retreat. How could this be? How could a species that they had written off as weak and primitive suddenly be holding their own against the Zarketh? The Zarketh Dominion, so confident in their power, had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the humans and their most unexpected weapon, their loyal and fearless Deathworld dogs. And as the first day of battle came to a close, the Galactic Council found themselves in a difficult position. They had always believed that only technology could win wars. But now, they were witnessing something far different, a battle of survival, instinct, and a unique bond between humans and their dogs that no alien species could ever understand. The Zarketh forces had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. The Deathworld dogs, loyal to their human commanders, continued their relentless hunt through the dense forests of the neutral planet. Their mission was clear: defend the land, defend their allies, and ensure that the Zarketh Dominion would never conquer this world. It was late in the evening when the first wave of Zarketh reinforcements arrived. The planet's skies were painted orange with the setting sun as massive Zarketh warships descended through the atmosphere. The humans had prepared, but they knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult battle. The Deathworld dogs were fierce, but the Zarketh had vast numbers and advanced technology on their side. Captain Elias Ward stood at the front of the human encampment, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had received reports from his scouts. More Zarketh were coming. Their ships filled the skies, blocking out the stars and casting an ominous shadow over the land. Ward could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about this planet. It wasn't even just about humanity. It was about proving that even the smallest, most underestimated species could stand against the giants of the galaxy. He turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Quinn, who was already issuing orders to the troops. Prepare for an all-out assault. The Zarketh think they can overwhelm us, but we're not backing down. Lieutenant Quinn nodded, then turned to the soldiers around her. You all know your roles. Stick to the plan. And remember, we're not alone in this fight. As the Zarketh ships touched down, the ground shook beneath the humans' feet. The Deathworld dogs, trained for moments like this, were already moving into position. Their sleek bodies moved with incredible speed and agility, their eyes glowing with an almost unnatural focus. They were the perfect soldiers, silent, fast, and deadly. The first Zarketh soldiers to exit their ships were immediately met with the sharp barks and snarls of the dogs. Without hesitation, the animals leaped into action, tearing through the Zarketh forces with precision and skill. The dogs didn't waste any time. They were trained to find the weak spots in their enemies, and they were ruthless in their approach. Within moments, the Zarketh soldiers were overwhelmed, their weapons ineffective against the speed and power of the animals. Meanwhile, Captain Ward led his human soldiers to the front lines. The Zarketh had expected their numbers to be enough to crush the human resistance, but what they hadn't expected was the intensity of the fight. The humans fought with everything they had, using the terrain to their advantage, setting up traps and ambushes that slowed the Zarketh forces down. The Zarketh, frustrated by the unexpected resistance, attempted to regroup and strategize. But the humans were everywhere. They moved in small, coordinated groups, striking swiftly and then disappearing into the trees, only to strike again from another angle. The Deathworld dogs were always at their side, moving in tandem with the soldiers, watching their backs and protecting them from any surprise attacks. As the battle wore on, the Zarkith started to realize something. Despite their technological superiority and sheer numbers, they were losing. The human soldiers fought with passion, determination, and a fierce loyalty to one another. The Deathworld dogs, more than just animals, were an integral part of the fight. They were not just pets, they were soldiers in their own right, and the Zarkith had no idea how to counter them. Back at the Galactic Council's headquarters, the news of the battle reached the council members. They watched the reports with growing disbelief. The Zarkith, once seen as unbeatable, were being pushed back by a species they had dismissed as weak. The humans had proven one thing. They were far more than anyone had given them credit for. In the council chambers, the members were silent. Soreth, who had laughed at Captain Ward's earlier words, was now watching in stunned silence. The tide of battle was turning, and the humans were proving that their strength lay not just in their technology, but in their unity and their bond with their animals. "Are we witnessing this?" asked a voice from across the room, one of the lesser council members, his tone filled with shock. "How is this possible?" Filvoreth, his usual arrogance replaced with doubt, muttered under his breath, "I underestimated them. But this is no ordinary battle." Back on the battlefield, Captain Ward knew that they couldn't keep up this pace forever. The Zarkith might have been losing ground, but they still had the advantage of numbers. Soon, more reinforcements would arrive, and the situation would only get worse. But he wasn't thinking about the future right now. He was focused on the present. "Let's push them back," he said, rallying his soldiers. "We've come too far to lose now. For humanity. For our dogs." The soldiers cheered, their spirits lifted by Ward's words. They had something the Zarkith would never understand. A will to fight, a reason to protect their homes, their families, and each other. And with the Deathworld dogs at their side, they knew they had the strength to face whatever the Zarkith threw their way. The battle raged on, and the humans and their loyal dogs fought with everything they had. But as the sun set and the stars began to appear in the sky, one thing became clear. The Zarkith Dominion had severely underestimated the power of humanity, and soon they would know the cost of that mistake. The battle continued to rage on the neutral planet, and the Zarkith forces were beginning to show signs of distress. What was meant to be a quick, overwhelming victory had turned into a nightmare they had never expected. The Deathworld dogs were relentless, and the human soldiers, despite being vastly outnumbered, were holding their ground. But Captain Elias Ward knew that time was running out. The Zarkith had more reinforcements on the way, and the humans couldn't keep up this pace forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Captain Ward gathered his most trusted commanders. He knew they needed a new plan. The Zarkith were starting to regroup, their forces consolidating, and the humans needed to strike fast before their enemy had a chance to recover. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Ward said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "If we don't take control of the high ground now, we'll lose this fight." Lieutenant Sarah Quinn, standing beside him, nodded. "The Deathworld dogs have done their part, but we need to use the terrain to our advantage. We have the forests, but the Zarkith still have their heavy artillery. We need to hit them where it hurts." Ward turned his gaze toward the distant hills. There, hidden in the trees, was an ancient communication relay station, an important piece of technology that the Zarkith had not yet discovered. If they could capture it, they could disrupt the Zarkith's communication lines, giving the humans a crucial advantage. "I'll take a small squad to the relay station," Ward said, determination in his eyes. "Quinn, you stay here with the rest of the troops. Keep the pressure on the Zarkith. Don't let them think they're winning." Quinn didn't hesitate. "Understood, Captain. We'll hold them off." The human soldiers, and their loyal Deathworld dogs moved quickly, disappearing into the trees as they prepared for the next phase of the battle. The night air was thick with tension, and every rustle in the underbrush could be the sound of an approaching enemy. The Deathworld dogs, though, seemed to feel no fear. They moved with incredible stealth, their senses attuned to every shift in the air, every change in the environment. They were the perfect companions for the humans in this deadly fight. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, the Zarketh commanders were beginning to grow frustrated. They had expected to crush the humans quickly, but instead they were being pushed back at every turn. The Deathworld dogs were wreaking havoc, and the humans' tactics, though simple, were proving effective. The Zarketh had underestimated them. "The humans are more resourceful than we thought," muttered General Vokar, the leader of the Zarketh forces. "These creatures are not like the others we fought. Their connection to their animals gives them an advantage." One of his officers, a young Zarketh soldier, nervously spoke up. "Sir, the humans have captured the relay station on the eastern ridge. We've lost contact with several of our battalions." Vokar's eyes narrowed in anger. Losing communication was a serious setback. The Zarketh depended on their technology to coordinate their forces, and without it, they were disorganized. The humans had struck where it hurt, and the Zarketh were struggling to keep up. Back at the relay station, Captain Ward and his team had successfully taken control. The relay tower stood tall above the surrounding trees, its lights blinking weakly in the dim light of the moon. The Deathworld dogs had been instrumental in clearing the area of any Zarketh patrols, allowing the humans to capture the station without a major fight. But they didn't have much time. Ward quickly set to work, using the human-made tech to hack into the station's systems. The Zarketh wouldn't know what hit them. As the humans began to disrupt the enemy's communication, Ward allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. The Deathworld dogs had proven their worth, but it wasn't just the dogs that were making a difference. It was the human spirit, the willingness to fight against impossible odds, that had kept them in the game. "Captain, we've got incoming," a soldier shouted from the edge of the clearing. Ward didn't hesitate. "Get the dogs into position. We're not letting them take this back." The Deathworld dogs sprang into action, positioning themselves between the humans and the approaching Zarketh forces. Their senses were sharp, and they could hear the Zarketh long before they came into sight. It was clear that the Zarketh were regrouping, determined to retake the station and restore their communication lines. But the humans weren't going to give them that chance. The battle was about to escalate. As the Zarketh pushed forward, Captain Ward knew they were reaching a critical point. If they could hold the relay station, they would cripple the Zarketh's ability to coordinate their forces. It would be the turning point of the war. "Ready the defenses," Ward shouted. "We hold this station at all costs." The humans and their Deathworld dogs took up positions, preparing for the Zarketh's next assault. Ward could feel the tension in the air, but he also felt something else. A deep, burning conviction. The humans had something the Zarketh didn't. They had heart. They had loyalty. And with their loyal Deathworld dogs by their side, they were ready to fight until the very end. The battle was far from over. The humans had managed to capture the Zarketh communication relay station, giving them a crucial advantage. But the Zarketh, relentless and determined, were not the kind to back down easily. They had suffered setbacks, but they were quickly regrouping, preparing for their next move. The humans knew that this small victory could quickly turn into a bigger problem if they didn't act fast. Captain Elias Ward stood at the front of the human forces, surveying the landscape. The trees that had once provided cover now seemed like a trap. The Zarketh would be coming, and they would be coming in full force. The sun had set completely, and the battlefield was now bathed in the eerie glow of the Zarketh's glowing weapons and equipment. The humans were ready, but it was clear that the fight would get harder before it got easier. "Lieutenant Quinn," Captain Ward called, turning to his second-in-command. "We've done well to disrupt their communications, but we can't sit here forever. We need to move out before they figure out how to regain control. Quinn nodded. Agreed, Captain. We've got a small window. We can't let them regain their coordination. The Deathworld dogs, ever alert, stood beside the human soldiers, their senses sharp and ears twitching at every sound. These animals had been a game changer, their incredible instincts helping the humans to stay one step ahead of the Zarketh. The dogs were not just pets, they were an essential part of the team, trained to detect even the slightest movement in the dense forest. As the humans prepared to move, a sudden explosion rocked the ground beneath them. The Zarketh had launched their first counterattack. The earth trembled as massive Zarketh war machines pushed through the tree line, their hulking forms intimidating and powerful. The humans had no choice but to brace for impact. "They're here," Ward muttered, his voice calm but filled with resolve. "Everyone, take your positions." The human soldiers scattered, moving into the trees for cover, while the Deathworld dogs ran ahead, charging toward the Zarketh machines. Their speed and agility gave them an edge. As the war machines fired, the dogs darted between the trees, dodging energy blasts and delivering powerful strikes at the weaker points of the machines. Their sharp teeth and claws cut through the metal armor, causing sparks to fly and smoke to billow from the machines. Lieutenant Quinn fired her weapon, picking off Zarketh soldiers as they tried to regroup. Her team was spread out, but they were all well trained. The humans didn't just fight for survival. They fought for each other. They fought for the future of their species. And they fought because they knew that the Zarketh had made a grave mistake underestimating them. As the battle raged on, the Zarketh forces began to change tactics. They had realized that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to break the humans. Instead, they started to deploy their specialized troops, elite Zarketh warriors who were trained in close combat. These soldiers were fearsome, heavily armored, and armed with weapons designed to pierce even the toughest defenses. But the humans had a plan. They knew they couldn't win a war of attrition. Instead, they needed to disrupt the Zarketh's focus, get under their skin, and make them second-guess their strategies. This was where the Deathworld dogs came in. The dogs had been trained not just to fight, but to use their senses to locate hidden threats. The humans had set up traps and ambushes throughout the forest, and the dogs were expertly guiding them to the right locations. Every time a Zarketh soldier thought they were safe, a Deathworld dog would leap out from the shadows, bringing them down before they had a chance to react. Captain Ward and Lieutenant Quinn led their squads deeper into the forest, staying out of sight, but always moving forward. They knew the Zarketh would be looking for them, trying to pin them down, but they had the advantage of surprise. The Zarketh warriors, though fierce, didn't know the terrain as well as the humans did. The forest was their home field, and they intended to use every advantage it offered. As the battle wore on, the Zarketh forces began to lose their composure. They had underestimated the humans, but now they were starting to understand. The human soldiers, despite their smaller numbers, were relentless, never giving an inch. And the Deathworld dogs, with their incredible strength and instincts, were more than a match for the Zarketh's brute force. Captain Ward kept his focus, his mind calculating every move, every strategy. He knew the Zarketh would soon realize that they couldn't win through sheer power alone. The humans had something more: their unity, their resourcefulness, and their bond with their animals. It was this bond that was turning the tide of the battle. "We're not just fighting for survival," Ward muttered to himself, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We're fighting for something greater, for our future." As the night wore on, the humans kept up the pressure, pushing the Zarketh back further. The Zarketh war machines were slowly being disabled by the Deathworld dogs, their weaker points exposed and vulnerable. The Zarketh soldiers, once so confident, were now scattered, struggling to coordinate without their communication lines. The battle wasn't over yet, but the humans had proven one thing: they were not to be underestimated. The Zarketh had thought they could crush them with sheer force, but they had underestimated the power of human ingenuity, bravery, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their loyal Deathworld dogs. And as the first light of dawn broke over the battlefield, Captain Ward knew that the next phase of the fight would be the final one. The Zarketh might have had the numbers, but the humans had something far more powerful: their determination to win, no matter the odds. The night had fallen silent, but the battlefield was far from peaceful. The humans and their loyal Deathworld dogs had managed to create enough chaos to force the Zarketh into a defensive position, but it was only a matter of time before they regrouped. Captain Elias Ward stood with Lieutenant Quinn, his eyes scanning the distant horizon, where the last remnants of the Zarketh war machines smoldered in the night. "How long until they send in more reinforcements?" Ward asked, his voice low but filled with determination. Quinn looked over the data feed on her wrist communicator. "They've been trying to re-establish their communication lines. We can expect them to send in more forces within the next few hours. But we've already set the stage for our next move." Ward nodded. The Zarketh may have been bigger and stronger, but the humans had proven that they could outthink and outmaneuver them. Their real strength wasn't just their weapons or tactics. It was their ability to adapt, improvise, and fight together as a team. "All right, Quinn, we'll move at first light. Get the team ready." As Quinn nodded and moved off to relay the orders, Captain Ward turned to the Deathworld dogs. These creatures, with their powerful bodies and sharp senses, had been instrumental in the battle. They had tracked down hidden Zarketh soldiers, ambushed their war machines, and kept the enemy off balance. The bond between the humans and their animals was unshakable. The dogs were not mere companions. They were warriors, fighting side by side with the humans in a way no other species had ever done before. In the distance, the sound of a Zarketh war horn echoed through the forest. It was a signal. The enemy was preparing for one final assault. The humans had no choice but to face them head-on. Lieutenant Quinn gathered the human soldiers, preparing them for the next phase of the battle. The humans had managed to inflict significant damage on the Zarketh forces, but they were not out of danger yet. The Zarketh were known for their resilience. If the humans didn't strike quickly, they might find themselves trapped and overwhelmed. "Remember," Quinn said, her voice steady and authoritative, "we hit them hard and fast. We don't give them a chance to regroup." The soldiers nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They had seen what the Zarketh were capable of, but they had also seen what the humans could do when they worked together. They were not going to back down. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, Captain Ward signaled the start of the next offensive. The Deathworld dogs led the charge, racing ahead through the underbrush, their powerful legs propelling them forward with incredible speed. The human soldiers followed close behind, their weapons at the ready. The Zarketh forces had set up defensive positions, but they were caught off guard by the humans' swift advance. The Deathworld dogs leaped over fallen trees, charging at the Zarketh soldiers with unmatched fury. Their jaws snapped, tearing into armor and flesh alike, while their speed and agility made it nearly impossible for the Zarketh to retaliate. Captain Ward and Lieutenant Quinn led the human forces, taking advantage of the chaos created by the dogs. The humans moved quickly, using their knowledge of the terrain to stay hidden and strike when the Zarketh least expected it. Every shot they fired was precise, every movement calculated. It wasn't long before the Zarketh began to retreat. Their confidence had been shattered by the humans' relentless attacks and the unexpected power of the Deathworld dogs. The Zarketh had underestimated their enemies, and now they were paying the price. But even as the Zarketh forces began to crumble, Captain Ward knew they weren't out of the fight yet. The battle wasn't won. The Zarketh still had more soldiers, more war machines, and more deadly tactics to employ. "They're not finished yet," Ward muttered to Quinn as they advanced through the forest. "They're just regrouping." Quinn nodded. "They'll be back. But we've bought ourselves some time. We need to keep pushing." As the humans pressed on, they could hear the distant sound of Zarketh reinforcements approaching. The time for stealth was over. It was time to confront the enemy head-on. The final clash between the humans and the Zarkith was about to begin. The humans had already proven their strength. They had shown the Zarkith that they were not to be underestimated. But now, with the Deathworld dogs by their side and their spirits unbroken, the humans were prepared to finish what they had started. They would not let the Zarkith take what was rightfully theirs. They would not be intimidated. And most importantly, they would never give up. As the first of the Zarkith war machines came into view, Captain Ward's voice rang out, steady and commanding. For humanity, for the future. The human soldiers charged forward, their weapons raised and their eyes full of determination. The Deathworld dogs were already in motion, racing toward the Zarkith forces with a roar. The battle would be fierce, but the humans were ready. They had faced the impossible, and now they were about to face it one last time. The battlefield was silent for a moment, the calm before the storm. Captain Ward stood at the front of his soldiers, eyes locked on the horizon. The Zarkith had regrouped, and they were coming in full force. But Ward was not afraid. He had seen what his team was capable of. The Deathworld dogs were at the ready, their muscles tensed, their eyes focused. The humans were prepared to finish what they had started. The Zarkith think they have the upper hand, Ward said, his voice steady and full of conviction. But they've never fought us like this before. We fight not just for survival, but for something more. Lieutenant Quinn nodded, her expression grim but determined. She knew what Ward meant. The humans weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for their future. For their families, their friends, and everything they had built. The Zarkith had threatened it all, but now it was time to end the threat once and for all. The ground shook as the Zarkith war machines appeared over the ridge, their massive forms casting long shadows on the ground. They had come in numbers, their machines bristling with weapons. But the humans weren't intimidated. The Deathworld dogs were the first to move, racing forward at an incredible speed, their eyes glowing with the instinct to fight. The humans followed closely behind, moving quickly and silently, taking cover as they advanced. They had been training for this moment for weeks, and now it was time to put everything they had learned to the test. They knew the terrain better than the Zarkith, and they had learned how to strike swiftly and without mercy. The first clash was deafening. The Deathworld dogs leaped onto the Zarkith war machines, tearing into the armored beasts with incredible force. Their claws ripped through metal, their jaws clamping down on weak points with precision. The Zarkith soldiers screamed in shock and pain, their massive machines buckling under the assault. Ward and Quinn led their forces in a relentless attack. The human soldiers fought with everything they had, using their weapons and their wits to take down the enemy. Each strike was calculated, each move designed to create chaos in the Zarkith ranks. The Zarkith were strong, but the humans were faster, more resourceful. The battle raged on, the sounds of war echoing through the valley. The humans were holding their ground, but they could feel the pressure mounting. The Zarkith were relentless, and every moment brought them closer to victory or defeat. We can't hold them forever, Quinn shouted, ducking behind a rock as a Zarkith blast sent debris flying through the air. We need to finish this. Ward didn't hesitate. We push forward. No retreat. We fight together, or we fall together. With that, the humans surged forward once more, their resolve stronger than ever. The Deathworld dogs were with them, their fierce loyalty and unmatched strength giving the humans an edge in the fight. Together, they were unstoppable. But the Zarkith were not giving up. They sent in wave after wave of soldiers and war machines, each one more powerful than the last. It seemed as though the humans were fighting an endless army. Ward's heart pounded as he watched his soldiers, but he knew they were not going to back down. They had already proven themselves, and they had something the Zarkith would never understand: unity. The humans fought not just for themselves, but for each other. They would never let one of their own fall without a fight. Just as the Zarkith seemed poised for victory, the ground beneath them began to rumble. A massive explosion tore through the battlefield, and the Zarkith war machines faltered. The humans had set up a trap, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. The explosion was just the opening they needed. Ward and Quinn led the charge once more, their soldiers pushing forward with renewed strength. The Deathworld dogs were relentless, tearing through the Zarkith forces, their sharp teeth and claws taking down anything in their path. The Zarkith, overwhelmed and disoriented, began to retreat. The battle was almost over. With one final push, the humans broke through the Zarkith's defenses. The last of the war machines fell, and the remaining soldiers scattered, their morale shattered. The humans had won. The Zarkith had been defeated. Captain Ward stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily but smiling. He looked around at his soldiers, his team, and the Deathworld dogs by their side. They had done it. Against all odds, they had driven the Zarkith off their planet and ensured their future. "We did it," Quinn said, her voice filled with awe. Ward nodded, his gaze turning to the horizon. "This is only the beginning. We've proven ourselves, but the galaxy is full of challenges. We'll face them, and we'll win." The humans had faced a powerful enemy and emerged victorious. But the real victory was in the strength they had found in each other. They had fought together, and together they had won. And as they stood there, watching the sun rise over the battlefield, they knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their history.